Hello and welcome. Let's get on with it.
In today's hard surface modeling tutorial, we are going to learn how to model these Cylinoids, how to set up the entire scene, as well as the camera and lighting. If you like to skip some sections, kindly use a timeline stated in the description. Now, let's jump straight into Blender. We are going to use Fluent Addon to create our sci-fi object. Let's delete these for now, we don't need them. Now, let's access the Fluent Radial menu by F. And create, scale up a bit, keep pressing the left mouse button. These are the shapes that you can create immediately, R, S and C. Let's go with the rectangle, click, drag to the left, and you have added a solidify modifier and your cube is ready. Now these are additional modifiers that we can work with. Let's go with the first bevel, which is basically this one. It adds bevel to these edges, and if we hold left mouse button again, this is the second bevel, which adds these, and if you hit the C key, it adds the sharp edge to it. Now let's go delete this off and start building our Cylinoid straight away. Now this is how these are the main options that you will need for now. For the left, we'll have to create, left click, scale up a little bit. Now we'll have to make a circle by first you have to click C. It's going to create a circle, and adding in a solidify modifier needed a little bit more. I think that height will do. Okay, now we need to add in a bevel to these edges. This is too smooth. I'm going to sharpen that up by clicking C. That's what I want. Now I need to add in some slice cuts to the body mesh. Scale it up a little bit. I'll need to slice the Cylinoid from the base, adding in the resolution by dragging the mouse button to the right. Yes, now I'll have to go in and change the shape because right now it's selected on the circle. I'll have to press S to create a customized shape of the cutter tool basically. Now make sure that you count these dots so that you have an even slice object from here to here, because that's what I want the cutter object final cut to be on my Cylinoid. Now holding the V key is gonna cut the entire object. Let's mirror this on the Z axis. Great, that's what I want. Yes, 2 slices on our Cylinoid. Now let's add in a cut on the header. Select this because it's a separate object now. Cut, which will basically get the difference. Now reducing the resolution, selecting C for the circle cutter, going up until here, bringing it down. Yes. Now if you want to go out of the editing, you have to click the right click on the mouse button. Now let's cut this object again with rectangles this time. You'll see where I'm going with this. Shift key to evenly increase this the cutter. Yes. Do we need a bevel? Let's add in a bevel. Let's hit the C key and get these sharp edges. I think I like this. Now let's add in a little more detail to the top. Again by clicking F, cut, and we're gonna stick to rectangles. Let's add in a circle. Let's bring down the sides somewhere about here. You know what, let's add in the additional detail on the other side. Let's undo this by Ctrl Z. Let's add in Now let's add in a rectangle. Keeping the shift key clicked, it centers out the rectangle. Now let's add in the thickness that we need, because we're going to be using this to cut the outside edges of our solenoid. By the circular array, it creates it in this direction. We can change this by clicking V. It's going to straighten it out. Or B, this is with the V, this is what shape it gets, and with B, this is how it's going to change. But we're going to stick to, let's do it with the B color. Let's bring it out to the outermost edge, somewhere about here. Let's just see whether it won't create any bad meshes. I think that's fine. Let's create another one again with the rectangle cutters, but again using the circular array. This time maybe slightly thin. Let's add the thickness that we need, and this time let's add in the circular array and hit the V key so that it goes in. This is basically changing the numbers by C. I'm gonna increase the number again by clicking C. This is reducing it. If you go to the right, it increases it. I'm gonna go with the 8 circular number. Now I'm gonna bring these down by clicking G and the Z axis, bringing it down, making sure it does not create any artifacts. I think that'll do. Let's add in the circular cutter now, so that I can maybe bring in some additional details. Bringing it down somewhere about here. Okay. Yes, that's good enough. Now let's add in another cutter. This time let's do it with cylinders. Let's add in a circle, and or let's just add in a rectangle, and let's adjust the thickness of this. Do we need a rectangle? Let's see how it plays out. Now let's create another one. Let's go with circle. Scale. Let's create a circle. Actually, we'll be making some thin cylinders, and then we're gonna do I'm getting a little confused. Let's see if we can add in a rectangle. What shape can we come up with this? Let's see. Circular array, V. Let's see. Oh, I don't like it that much. Let's try with the cylinder that's in my mind. Yes, I'm not liking it that much. Let's undo this by Control Z. And let's add in these cylinder cutters. I think that's gonna look nice. Some other cutters may be on the outside edges, but let's decide first with these inside circular cylinders. And you know what? Let's just add in plates. Plates is going to extend the base and give it an additional support on which it will be setting down on. By pressing enter, you can add in this thickness to it. Now that the plate has been applied, it's giving it the extended look of an additional support. Now let's go to the top and add, or let's just add some slices to the front face in rectangle shapes. Let's add a scale, increase the scale. Now increasing the, it's going into a R. Now keeping the shift key clicked, otherwise the rectangle starts from the point where you click. With the shift key, it basically makes that point the center point. Now I don't want to go all the way, I'll just keep it to the front. Maybe bring it up a bit. Array modifier, S key to multiply the number of counts, increasing it quite a bit. G, bring it down by Z axis, maybe a little bit more because I need to add in another slice cut on the top. I think these are good enough. Now let's press, I need a slice cut here. Again, let's add the other slice, bring up the scale somewhere about here. I'll make it a little bit thinner than the ones at the bottom, something of this. V all the way to the back and right click, outside. Great. Yes, I like it. Now for the top, let's add in those cylinders that I've been so anxiously waiting for. Select the top, create, for this face, let's bring in the resolution up a bit. I'm not getting that point that I wanted. Nevertheless, let's just start by selecting this point, and we're going to move the axis once we create the right height. Bring it up with this solidify modifier. Of course, it's already built in the add-on. Let's increase it somewhere about here. Let's add the radius. Oops. No, something, the resolution has been clicked, therefore this is the one that I clicked by mistake. Now we need to go with the radius. I think it will not fit in entirely. I need to reduce the radius by left click, radius, squeeze it down, something of this sort. Let's move it in with the G and this axis. Great. Now we'll mirror this so that we can bring it to the back. These sides, they won't work because we'll have to duplicate them, because I don't want to create them again. Don't want it to vary in size. So for that, we'll have to apply the modifiers first, because if we don't, if we just do it the way it is right now, it's a single object. It's not on the other side. Because if I create it here, it will not be as symmetrical. Therefore, if I duplicate this and I try to rotate this, it's going to rotate in its own position. Why? Because the origin point is right at the base. Therefore, I'm going to delete that off. I'll have to apply the changes to these. Even if I go for individual origins, see the origin point is still there because that's not an object. Now when I complete it, now these are two separate objects. I can access their data mesh through edit, select these two faces, and gonna bring the cursor to select, which is at the bottom. And what that'll do is the 3D cursor is exactly in the center. Set the origin point to the 3D cursor. For this actively selected object, rotate z-axis is 90 degrees and perfectly aligned. Now I'm just going to bring it down in the z-axis by G somewhere about here, and we are good to go. Okay, now we're done with this. Now let's add in another cut for the cylinder, something of this radius. Doesn't matter how deep it goes. Circular array is going to add in automatically 4 objects, but I want to increase the number by clicking C. 6, 7, 8. I'll go with 8 repetitions. Now let's bring it a little bit further out. You need to click the left button on the mouse to affect the changes, and I think that's good enough. Yes. Now let's just have a look around. Let's add in. Now let's add in. Now we're basically done with the solenoid up until now. I'll be adding in additional something of an extractor sorts, basically, which is going to go all the way in, and assuming that the solenoids are energy containers or anything of that sort, and if it has to be extracted, then we're just gonna make an extractor for the top. Circular array, we'll multiply them to the number of 8 by clicking C. Now we're gonna move these with the G and then the Y axis somewhere about here. Click again on the circular array so that it goes all the way in those circles, because we'll be building the extractor machine from bottom all the way to the top. It's going to be something very small. Let's bring it out like that. Now let's create the top part of the extractor. Let's bring it in by adding in a circle. It's going to be something bigger than the existing circular array, something about here. Exactly. We're just going to bring it up, so it's going to create this object as if these are the needles that are going to go in and extract whatever the energy or the elements, whatever it's being contained. Let's add in a slice. Let's bring up the scale as well as the resolution so we can add in a nice simple loop cut. And of course we'll be going with a custom shape by pressing S there, bottom, making sure that we count the points because it helps you easily making a symmetrical cutter object on the grid. V key all the way to the back, and we're done. Now let's add in some additional details to this part by adding in. Let's reduce the resolution. We don't need it to be that high. Again, circle, bring it out, and we're gonna add bevels to this one by left click, bevel, C key, adding in some sharp edges, something about there. Let's do it again. Left click, and we are out of the editing. Great. Now let's add in another part which will further extend the extractor. Now let's bring it again. It's going to be a circle, basically a cylinder, going all the way, this time a little bit further up, and we will be adding a slice cut to this as well. Right click, exit the edit mode. Now again F, slice, scale it up, increase the resolution. We're going with again the customize shape, S key, slightly different shape of the cutter, making sure that it's symmetrical, and bringing it all the way outside of our object. V key to cut the object entirely from front to the back. And I think we are pretty much done. Maybe I'll just add in a simple cube or a cuboid for the top, something sort of a handle or a light source, something of that sort that I have in mind. Let's reduce the resolution. Let's create a rectangle by pressing R. Shift key is going to center up that origin point. Something about her, extrude it out by adding in, just by dragging the mouse key. And let's add in a first bevel. Let's see how that looks. First bevel, C key. No, let's add in a second bevel, C. Yeah, I think I'll be going with this. Second bevel, yep. Now let's add in a slice cut. First, let's exit this by the right click of the mouse. Now select F key and then slice tool. Cut. No, I don't think I'll be going with the cut. I think I'll be going with, let's see, let's add in a rectangle. Let's extrude, and no, it's gonna create artifacts because it's getting too small and I'm not in the mood to go into the details of readjusting the mesh, because it's just gonna be so small it won't be visible to give it that much of attention. Let's undo that. Let's slice it. Let's customize it to, no, I don't want to use a rectangle. Let's go back and use the slice and a customize shape, which is by pressing S on our keypad. Something like that. Now, do I want to go all the way? No, I think I'm going to go halfway, as if this is something like a light source that I'm going to use. Maybe I'll add in some squares. Let's add in with the slice tool. Change it by R. Something of this sort. Let's see. Okay. Let's mirror this. First, let's bevel this. Alright, now let's see. Let's mirror this on the other side. Looks good. Yep. Let's come out, and I see some artifacts going on again. Let's just delete this off. And great, it's clear. Alright, I'm going to keep it empty. That's what happens if you slice an object, and if you don't like it, maybe it's creating artifacts, you can just delete it off, and hopefully it will solve the issue of the artifacts. Nevertheless, now you see all these modifiers are the ones that you've applied by just clicking of simple buttons. Now we're going to apply an autocomplete using the Fluent, and you'll see all these modifiers are gone because they have all been applied. And now you can access the mesh by going into edit mode, and you will see exactly what you see here. Otherwise, if you haven't applied those modifiers yet, or if you haven't done the autocomplete option, haven't selected it from the Fluent menu, then it's basically you will not be able to change the mesh because the changes have not been applied. Now basically what we're doing is we're parenting the object to one main part of the object, because it will help to navigate and move these objects, something in this sort. Now the same goes for the bottom as well. I'm going to select all of these, and the last object that I select, which is I'm going to keep it to active selection, is by making parent to that main object. I'm going to just join these two, and now we're done. Great. Okay, so now we're going to duplicate these and make 4 copies the way that you've seen in the very first animated video. 4 identical Cylinoids with their extractors, and just seeing everything is all sorted. Now we're gonna add in a plane, and now we have started making our background scene, which is basically the plane, as well as we're gonna use similar planes for the background, and we're gonna give in some details to it by very simply altering the mesh and adding in materials to it. Now we've duplicated it. We'll bring the second plane to the back somewhere about here. We scale it down in the z-axis, bring it up a bit in the z-axis as well. Duplicate this, rotate this in the other axis, and close it on that side. Bring it to the front. This is our main scene that we will be using to create. Now we can add in the Blenderkit, which is by logging in or sign up. Of course, you'll be signing up. What this allows is it's basically going to open up a menu and you'll be logged in. This gives you free access to a lot of models, a lot of brushes, and a lot of materials, and we'll be using free materials to materialize our scene. Now if you see, there aren't any materials. Now let's search for materials and let's type in metal. Now you'll see all the different type of metals that you will straight away get, which is just drag and drop, and you will have let's add this metal to the back, and this is it's too wide. Let's reduce the size of these grid lines, of the lines that we're seeing on the wall. Let's add in brushed aluminum for the floor. Yep, that'll do, but the background, it's too prominent. I need it to be subtle. Let's go into UV editing. Let's select this, go into edit mode, select by A, and then we're going to scale it. No, not down. We're going to bring it up. Let's render this so we can actually see the materials, how these lines are going to shrink, because I don't want them to be so prominent. I'm going to scale this even further. I'm basically increasing the size, and you can see the pattern is going to get smaller and smaller. Let's go back in the layout. I like this. Alright, now let me link these two and see if it works, which I don't think it did. So I'm going to keep this for now. If you don't like these lines, if they're too prominent, you can do that by unwrapping it in the UV unwrap folder. Now let's add in colors, materials basically, to our Cylinoids. Now for the base, I'm going to go back and add in a plastic material that I like in the Blender kit. Let's go search in plastics, and it should be in the very first one. This is the one. See, it gives it a very subtle texture to it, as if it's a support. Now I'm going to link these 3 bases with this, Control L, and they have been copied. Now let's add in some normal metals, of course, going up all the way and slightly decreasing actually the brightness, and the roughness to be 0.3. I think that'll do. This part, which is the core, I'm going to keep it to a lighter tone. Again, adding in a new material all the way to metallic, roughness to be 0.3. I think yep, that'll do. Now for these I'm gonna go for a darker tone, 0.3 again. Let me bring it down to maybe 0.5. Okay, this is something that I'll be going with a red metal or a red object. Let's bring it down. This. Yep, I'm liking it. Let's check the roughness. Maybe, yeah, I don't want it to be too I like this because otherwise it becomes too dark for me, but of course it's totally up to you. Now let's copy these materials to it, giving it a darker tone. Now for the extractor bit, let's select the bottom, and to create a good contrast, let's select the lighter tone for this as well as this one. We'll go for a lighter tone. Let's see how it turns out. We're gonna go for the darker tone for this, and I don't see much of a difference. I think you'll need to create a higher contrast, but for now let's just delete the principal BSDF, add in an emission shader, something that will reflect as if it's a light source, bluish tone, strength to be on 5. Let's go in and add in bloom, which is the option which you get in the EV render, which helps it to glow. And okay, that'll do. That's creating a better contrast for my liking. And now we're gonna copy all these materials to those other Cylinoids, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna delete those off, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna duplicate the first object which has all the materials. So let's just duplicate them once again by making sure that you select all the separate objects, because I haven't joined these yet. I'm gonna keep them separate. Shift D, duplicate. Let's just bring it next to each other. Now we have materialized our Cylinoids. We have added in some basic textures to our scene, but I'll be adding in some sci-fi planes to this. First, let's add in a simple edit by adding in some loop cuts. Control R, and then I'm going to bevel these to something of this sort, and then I'm going to extrude them outwards. Now I'm going to select the base by going into selecting these edges by going into the edge select by clicking number 2. I'm going to G, and in this axis I'm going to bring it out. Very simple. Now I'm going to add in more loop cuts here by Control R, 2 loop cuts. Right click is going to go right in the center, and gonna bevel these and extrude. Before I extrude, let me add in the loop cuts here as well as here by Control R, 2 loop cuts again. And now let me bevel these 4 slightly. Now let me select these. Now I'm gonna have some trouble because of the texture that I've selected for the plane. You see, now I should have done these extrusions before and then applied the texture, but I'll try to get these perfect. Extrude, let's bring it to the back, giving it some more 3D details. Something very simple, but I need to add in those sci-fi planes that I want. So let's add in a plane, scale it up, and back to Blenderkit. Let's search, rotate this here. Let's search for planes or panels. Sorry, not planes, panels. Yep, it's getting too small again. I think we'll have to go into the UV editing tab here and gonna go into edit mode, select all, and gonna scale it down, making it a one-piece panel, one-piece sci-fi panel all the way to here. All right, now I'm gonna rotate this Let's go in the layout tab, rotate this 90 degrees. Okay, now let's scale it down. That's too small. Yep, front view is going to help me to decide the exact dimension that I want for this. Adjust it, bring it down. Now I'm going to be adding in the array modifier to multiply this as if this is this is where it's being placed. Let's add an account. It's going too high. Let's bring it down and let's apply this array modifier for now. If I add another array modifier, no, I'm just going to duplicate this axis. I'm going to duplicate this again by covering these parts of our wall, as to say, or the background. Perfect. It looks really sci-fi. See how simple it is to set up an entire scene? I'm just going to drag these. I'm going to select the active objects, which are basically parents. I'm going to bring them down to place them on the base. Now this is the angle that I'll be going for the final output. Let's add in the camera and Control Alt 0. That's going to select the screen that where we are and place the camera automatically there. Now let's render this. Now what happened is we did not add lighting to our scene. Now let's add in some lights. Let's add in some area lights. I like these. Let's scale this up. Let's bring it up actually first. Scale it up in the x-axis. Let's scale it something of here so that it's one light source. It's going to reflect on all the 4 Cylinoids. Let's rotate this, bring it to the back, something like a backlight. Pump up the power to 2000. Bring it back. That's good enough. Now let's duplicate this, bring it to the front as well, and then rotate this to face our Cylinoids. I think it's good enough, but let's do some alterations. Let's bring it back. Let's pump up the power to, let's say, 3000. Let's go into, no, that's too high for me. Let's check 1500. I think that's settled enough. Okay, now for I'm going to duplicate this again because the back wall, which is the panel that we've added, it's too dark. We can't see any details. I'm going to pump up the power to 5000. Let's bring it closer to the backside and see. Beautiful. I'm gonna bring it down and move it to the left because I can't see the third panel. I need to see slight reflections from there, and great. Let's bring it down to 4000. I think I like it. Yep. So now we have our lights set up and we'll be just adjusting our camera angles. Why is this looking so dark? It's a minor detail, we can probably skip it, but I think I'm gonna change this rim to something. Let's say search metal. I saw some really nice red metal paint. Is this one? No, it's still too dark. Let's try the orange paint, which is right next to it, because I want it to be a fresh red color, but don't want to pump up the light source too much. No, that's not the one. Let's search. That's too rusty. Ah, that's the one. Red paint. Let's add it in there. And exactly, that's the one. You see, there's a minor difference. Of course, we can skip it, but a little bit of a perfectionist at times. Not always. It doesn't help. Too time consuming. I'm just gonna select these all, and I'm gonna select this one in the end and link the material, and voila, perfect. Now this is our main scene. Of course, I'm going to twitch the lightings and the camera. I'm going to lock the screen to the camera. So I'm gonna adjust what I want as the output, and I'm gonna create a little animation, a simple one, which you will see. Once again, thank you for watching. Stay tuned. Toodles!